participation. So as far as we know,
You're the only ones.
in New York State, and we're pretty darn proud of it.
It should be.
Okay, thank you. That's great. So again, thank you everybody, and residents, come to the farmers market, give them a visit, learn more, and grab a Mexican sucker. So thank you. All right, next up we have Uplift Irondequoit.
Hello. We are here tonight because we had some things happening earlier on in the year which involved students no longer being allowed to go into I-Square, Dunkin' Donuts. My understanding is on the east side of the town, sometimes Wegmans has certain times that kids are not allowed in there. So we have a committee that was born out of community concern after youth were banned from some of these establishments. And through no fault of the businesses, inappropriate behaviors contributed to that. But again, it's always a small number who create the negative for the entire group of kids. So with that, we wanted to hear what was happening in the town, what people's background feelings were about the voices of youth, parents, the town, businesses, etc., in regards to finding out what we could do to help with building protective factors for kids after school. Rather than having kids at loose ends, causing potential other problems within the town, what can we as a community do? So there were several meetings that were held. Rory has been an active member of that group, and a survey was created to gain a clearer picture of what Irondequoit youth were seeking and what barriers exist to meet their goals. We also met with some specific youth who came to our meeting and were very vocal about some of their issues. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan. This is Megan Kelly, who is our new data analyst. Mike McTighe created the survey. He launched it, he put it together. Mike has now got a job full-time with United Way, so we had to say goodbye to Mike, but he found his own replacement with Megan, so we're handing that off to her to present. Thank you.
Okay, so as Ginny was talking about, the survey was administered in June 2023. It was emailed to students via the school. The highest response rate was from East Ridge High School. 76% of responses came from that school, but we got a couple other schools in there like East Ridge, East Irondequoit Middle School and Irondequoit High School. There were 165 responses in total with a 93% completion rate, which is pretty strong. And the largest response was from 10th to 11th graders. I think it was like around 50% was between 10th and 11th graders. There's an even gender split, as you can see. About 47% reported being female, and 48% identified as being male. So in terms of programming,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you mind just speaking into the microphone?
Oh, sorry. There is minimal support for gender-specific programming. As you can see by this graph over here, about 5% of students wanted specific, like gender-specific programming. They largely preferred options for co-ed programming, or having both options was the largest percentage. Like 2/3 of students wanted to have that option of either co-ed or gender-specific programming. In terms of indoor and outdoor preferences, there's an even preference for those types of activities, as you can see by this diagram down here. 60% had like no preference, and it was pretty evenly split between having an indoor versus outdoor preference. When asked to list some activities they'd be interested in and like a free response, students largely reported sports, games, music, art, and cooking, as you can see by the word cloud. So sports was the largest one. It's like the biggest one there. But we have some other like interesting responses like dance, art, cooking, and just things that are fun. They expressed the most interest in attending activities at the school, I believe 30% of students wanted to have activities that were like after school, like physically at the school. But they were also interested in having activities be present at the library, park, gym, or at the Irondequoit like community center, like recreational center. In terms of important features of the activity, so students were given these 7 responses and just asked to rank them in the order of most importance. I feel like I'm moving away from the mic. So these 7 responses, students were asked to rank them in order. So cooler colors represent a choice being first, like higher, more important for a student, while the more red, orangey colors represent a feature being less important. So as you can see, a place to be with my friends was ranked first for like 60% of students, while making friends and meeting new people was ranked second. This shows that students are really interested in like the social aspect of activities. So making friends and meeting new people is like one of the most important aspects of programming, with minimal interest in getting involved with decision making and discussing youth activities. But a few students did report that volunteer opportunities were an important feature of programming. Another important thing to note is that few students didn't participate in activities, as you can see by the first statement here. Most students indicated that they did participate in activities. Barriers to participation. So students were given these statements over here and asked to rank their top 2 that would impact their ability to participate in an activity. Not knowing about activities was the #1 thing preventing youth participation. So future programming should advertise in places where youth can see. With costs of an activity was the second barrier to participation, so programming available should be made affordable for students. Some other barriers included parental registration and available food, as well as transportation, like rides to and from the activity. In terms of best times for programming, overall, during the summer, the best times for programming are between 12 and 5 p.m., as you can see by these rankings over here. There's also some need for programming on Friday and Saturday evenings in the summer. In terms of the school year, students greatly prefer having programming that's right after school, so from like 3 to 5 p.m. However, some students also would prefer having programming being done in the early afternoon on weekends, like between 12 and 5 p.m. There's minimal interest in late evening programming occurring after 7 p.m. There's more of a need for programming in the summer compared to the school year, as you can kind of see by this chart up here. For the Irondequoit Community Center, though there is some interest in programming at the community center, many students reported that they're not sure if they would attend. As you can see by this graph here, like 45% indicated they'd be unsure if they'd want to go. But many students did report they'd be more likely to attend activities if transportation was available. So you can see by this graph here. And that number jumps up if food is available. 56% of students indicated they would go to the center if food was made available. So on that topic of food, most young people are willing to spend up to $10 on food. As you can see, like the highest number of responses, we're willing to spend money on food that's between like $5 to $10. So food shouldn't be like more than $10 at these activities. Most popular snacks were pizza, snacks, chips, and chicken, but there was a call for some options like fruits, salads, having water available, granola, or Cliff Bars. Yeah, any questions?
Does anybody have any? So it seems like a lot want to stay at school, but would be willing to come to a community center with transportation and food would be the key pieces.
That's the bottom line. What we ended up finding out, Greg from the library indicated too that he found the timing of programs is very beneficial for him and his program and how to work around that. And he said that was really interesting information for him to know. So we were able to, I think, tap into a few key points on this in terms of informing those who are working with kids already. And bottom line is, we're looking at, well, what are our next steps? And we asked each organization, so the school districts, as well as coming back here to the town, to take this information back and present it to their school boards, and in this case, to the town council. And the questions are, what is your willingness to provide staff time, energy, and potentially finances, which that's all for discussion, to work through some of these issues. The other is, what kind of targeted information sharing can we do collectively among schools and town? And lastly, in terms of creation of what currently exists in a format kids and parents could access in any internal changes within the schools. So we're looking at, again, that communication piece. How do we get information the best possible way? Because a lot of it has to do with the fact that people just don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And there are programs going on in the town. I know the Art Center has programs that they offer. There's other groups within the town. I think part of it is harnessing all of that information about what is happening and make sure families have access to it. And then, and again, the biggest barrier to getting to the community center is transportation. But Shannon has also said she can't have 100 kids show up. She's got to would like to build it more organically, so that, word of mouth, kids come because their friends are here, and it's small growth, because she's got to get staffing for it too. So understood. So we have a summary of all of this to give to you, just so that you've got that in your files.
Does anybody have any questions? Yep, Kimmy?
So Ginny, my question is Uplift thinking that they would want to be the middle of the spoke in the wheel to wrangle there's a lot more information gathering that has to happen, right? Because we just said we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And so I think we really need one entity, be it what it will, probably outside of the town, who could figure out everything that's out there before we start adding programs and possibly duplicating things that exist.
Let me just tell you how we got involved in this. It was a group, one particular individual who got particularly upset about the I-Square thing, and started a Facebook page that outraged a whole bunch of people. And you know what happens when all that goes on. And I was approached by a couple of other coalition members saying, isn't this something Uplift should be looking at? And absolutely it is, because of protective factors, and that's one of the things we're trying to build, protective factors and reduce the risk factors. So because of that, we got involved in it and saying, look, we can be a fiduciary for it should you decide to go get grants asking this individual. Well, guess who's here?
Right.
So,
Right.
Anyhow, here we are.
So are there supports through like Monroe County Youth Council, City County Youth Council, YAR?
Tony from Youth Council
Yep.
is coming to these meetings.
Okay.
And I think this is scratching the surface of a much bigger concern in terms of, it's not just a matter of what are our kids doing after school, it's really building in our town's protective factors. And I think that's one step, is getting the information out about what we don't know, what kids don't know, and families don't know that might be available, and working on some financial supports in order to build in transportation to the community center, working with the schools so that perhaps they're changing some of their policy, and they're looking at that. So whether it happens or not, we don't have a whole lot of control over the schools, but trying to at least keep that information flowing so that maybe it makes everybody a little bit more. So this is the beginning. And in answer to your question, are we willing to be that one place? I think we already are.
I kind of sense that. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but when I think back to the early days of Youth Council, when we started the Youth Council in Irondequoit, there just has to be that one force. So as you continue down this path, certainly keep us abreast of what's happening, and we'll help where we can. But I applaud your efforts, and I think that it's sitting in the right hands.
Well, thank you. And,
Yeah.
any
Any-
other ideas?
John, Peter, you guys have
I
anything?
think I remember too back when the community center was just being in its formative days with former rec director, there was some talk about a busing program between the high schools and the community center. But, obviously you're not just dumping a bunch of kids over there with no programs and things like that. So I do agree that, transportation was labeled as an issue way early on. I don't know that there was a solution ever found for how to do that. And,
Well-
I can see a lot of
I
complexities
think,
too.
and I think that problem got worse because they don't have enough bus drivers to currently supply. That was talked about too. Like,
Schools have already, both districts have already said, we do not have the funds or the capability of operating
Right,
transportation
yeah.
at all. So that's where we are.
and schools and after-school programs have changed drastically since I was a kid. I mean, what was discovered by me in these meetings is that basically these kids are, that school bell rings and they have X amount of time to get out of that building and you're done, So when I was a kid, we'd go home, change, come back, grab the ball from the gym,
Play
go out and play
dodgeball.
catch, dodgeball, hang out.
Basketball.
If you go back further than that, I think they had a smoking cage at the high school kids used to hang out with in the 80s when, after school. So now it's get off campus immediately. So some challenges. Yeah, there's no intramurals, no after-school programs. There are some, yeah.
But if you're not signed up specifically for that particular like art club or
Yeah.
program, and they don't happen every day, you might be an art club, but that's once a week or once every other week. And so,
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
yeah, we'd go back up to school and play with the latch. At the time, they were called the latchkey kids. I don't know if that's politically correct, but that's. Yeah,
That's what I was saying. So
Yeah, but we
you,
used to go play. We used to go play. Grab and play. Now they're not allowed to do that or anything. So.
so you brought, obviously you made this presentation to the school districts, right? And, yeah,
taken it, both the
Okay.
representatives from the school districts
Okay.
took them back. West has not yet met.
okay.
East has met, and they've presented it.
Right, so I mean, obviously, if they do eventually have some after-school programs, there's no need for transportation, right? But there's gotta be interest in that type of thing, if they,
I think, John, there might always be a need for transportation.
Okay.
Because
well, I'm not saying, I'm saying eventually, sometimes if we have things up at the community center, but if the school districts once in a while have some programming, but, sure, community center, I think Pete we talked about that, but we have to have some kind of program, something for them to do when they get to the community
Right,
center.
and
Yeah.
the thing is, the community center, from 3 in the afternoon until 5, there's not a lot
Yeah.
going on there. I mean, not from what I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
The seniors have gone home, everybody's had their lunch, they're gone.
They're having dinner.
Yeah. So, right, like 4 o'clock. So, yeah, I mean, I know the place is hopping in the
Yeah.
morning, I'm one of the seniors
Sure.
over there using it, but,
Yeah.
from 3 to 5 or 3 to 6, it's not super busy
Yeah.
there. It would be ideal
Okay.
to be able to
Sure.
put kids in there if there was a program.
Right, right.
Yeah, I
If
think
they wanna
it's-
come.
Yeah, and I think the success of any of these programs, not to put pressure on anybody, is the school district kind of opening up to and allowing us to reach out and contact these kids and be a part of that process, because sometimes there's a little bit of a block there. So,
So that's what we're trying to
yep.
get to.
Which is why you'd be great as the middle person. So, yep. Okay, great. Thank you so
All right,
much.
thank
Yep.
you.
Okay, we have town attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I'll be speaking on I-Square now. Mr. Supervisor, board members, town staff, you observed and heard comments about a certain sign that went up at I-Square indicating or intimating that the town had done something improper to harm and/or impede the development of I-Square. So I was asked to look into that claim. I reviewed lots of documents and did some research, conversations with many people. I want to thank town staff, Michelle Nichols, Mary Warner, John Nitty, Maria Vecchio, and from Labella, Catherine Powers, and Wes Petty for helping to assemble this information. I did hand out, prior to the start of the meeting, a packet for you. It's a letter from Labella that kind of goes through the different problems with some maps attached, so I will be going through this. I purposefully did not staple the maps because you're going to be switching between them. But before we get into kind of the details about some of the concerns that the town staff has had with the development itself, I just wanted to give you a short answer. The town's done nothing to inhibit the development of I-Square. If anything, it has only been supportive through tax breaks and different approvals that have been given so far. So by way of background, this property was purchased and the intent was to create a community center. Public funds were used for the development of this property. From the town, there was a series of pilot agreements, the most recent one being from 2019. The assessment was reduced by many millions of dollars. In fact, the assessment is set at originally the pre-demolition value of the property, so not much at all comparatively. And then there was an escalator of just 2.5% of that value every year, despite whatever development occurred there. So over the life of the pilot, it's possible, depending on how long it's held and kept for the purposes that it's supposed to be for the pilot, it could be tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars that are saved just in taxes. And those saved taxes would be from town taxes, county taxes, and West Irondequoit School District. In addition, there were many public grants given, totaling $3,561,996. 4 grants in particular. There's a green stormwater at I-Square for $442,000 and some change. The purpose there was to implement rainwater harvesting and reuse as part of the construction, porous pavement and gardens and green roofs. There was also another grant from New York State, the I-Square Green redevelopment, that's $393,000 for many of the same items. A mixed-use development grant for $1,926,500. And a sustainability grant, again, kind of part of a green initiative for $800,000. So, construction for this particular property, plans and such began I think probably some of the discussion started around 2015 or so, if I'm understanding the documents correctly. And it was in 2018 that the planning board was approached with a site plan for the development of the property. Now I'm looking at the Labella letter, and we'll go through this, but the bottom line is that a particular set of drawings were presented to the planning board. They were approved in a certain form, and the development has not followed that in many key respects. That creates significant hazards and problems for the town, and just created conditions that couldn't have been anticipated by the planning board, because that wasn't what they approved. The first one is this access road that is supposed to connect Lorraine Drive to 775 Titus Avenue. And if you look at the exhibits, Exhibit A, which has red, yellow, green, and blue on it. So this is item 2. The yellow is supposed to be the access drive here. That was approved by the planning board, and certainly that is important because means of access, such as this particular access road, can impact circulation, grading, drainage, emergency vehicle access, and signage and building placement. So basically, this is a package that's being presented to the planning board, and adjusting anything might end up changing the planning board's mind as to how it should be approved in the final form. Now, what ended up happening with this, you'll see in attachment C, is this wall was built. And it was, so there is no access whatsoever. So certainly this is a problem because it's so different from what was approved. Certainly circulation, grading, drainage, very important to consider, but also there's a problem with getting emergency vehicles to the buildings that are behind this now. So that is something that changed and remains unresolved right now. We'll move on to the second category. This was supposed to have about one building that was about 9,000 square feet, and that's shown in attachment D in red, number 1 in red. So that ended up being just a gravel parking lot. And certainly, again, this affects the circulation, grading, drainage, emergency vehicle accident, all of that the town board, the planning board was considering when it looked at these particular plans. But also, building placement of the other buildings is implicated. Also landscaping, screening, pedestrian walkways, and general site configuration. So the fact that this was not built as planned, is a deviation from what the planning board approved. Number 3, again on attachment D, item 2 in yellow. These are supposed to be parking spaces. Currently, it is an outdoor eating area, which presents several problems. Number 1, I understand I did drive by earlier today. There wasn't any outdoor dining going on in this rain. But from what I understand, it's about 100 seats that are out there right now. And the town board is well aware from recent discussions on other matters, how important getting the right number of seats is for a particular property. And the town code, section 235-27 sub C, says that outdoor dining needs to be approved by the director of the community development. And even then, only 20 seats is appropriate. So this is a clear violation of the town code to allow outdoor dining at all, not part of what the site plan had originally entailed. And could, especially when coupled with this access lane issue, could be a real hazard for the town and the residents. So number 4, again, this is, back to attachment A, and this time we're going to be looking at the blue portion of it. Here, there's supposed to be cottage-style dwelling units for 20 of these residential units. Turns out only 14 were built. This implicates, are there variances that are necessary? It's just so different from the original plans that we're not certain of what the impacts are. Again, grading, stormwater management, circulation, landscaping, all of those couldn't be considered as part of the as-built because it wasn't ever approved by the planning board. Also, back to attachment D, number 3, in blue, here is a curb cut that was never approved. This creates public safety issues and could very well, involve either the Monroe County Department of Transportation or the New York State Department of Transportation, but we don't really know because this was never given a chance to be considered by the planning board. And then finally, there's a parking area. This is again on attachment A in green. And this is not supposed to be a parking area, but it now is a parking area. So certainly, that creates problems with drainage and stormwater management, all sorts of things, in addition to just this general site plan review, because there might be impermeable surfaces that are there now that couldn't have been considered as part of the State Environmental Quality Review Act review that happened at the time that the site plan was approved. So, certainly all of these have been accumulating throughout the years. The town has made recent efforts to engage the owners of the development and come to a resolution of these. Certainly there's a lot of different options. Some that are more punitive than others, but certainly within the town's purview and the authority that the town has. But, again, this is a business that's within the community. So there have been, most recently, last fall, negotiations that the town tried to engage in with the owners of the development. There was an intermediary that was involved just in case, there were personalities, someone to smooth things over a little bit. And the town put together, a list of things that could be addressed with an additional submission to the planning board to kind of look at all of this and make sure that it's all good. Those would involve, there is some New York State issues that the fire marshal wants to resolve. The retaining wall that's blocking the road, existing outdoor seating needs to be considered. Why there's a paved lot, or why there's a now gravel lot where the building was supposed to be, and what the intention is as far as paving it in the future. Why the parking lot that wasn't a parking lot originally is now a parking lot for those 4 spaces. The changes to the cottages, and there's apparently porches and decks that weren't part of the original site plan that was approved that are a part of the residences. So, certainly these are the items that the town wanted to address through these conversations, and they were just completely rebuffed. So the owner of the development, Mr. Nolan, has indicated that he's not willing to in any way participate in these conversations to resolve these issues. And his response, in fact, was the sign that kind of prompted this entire inquiry. So certainly from here, I would be interested to know how the town board feels about it. One option would be to, again, extend this offer to him, maybe in a more public manner. The other thing that could be done is that we, cite the violations. I would have to look into that because there's some paperwork that we need to resolve first. But that's another option. So, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to address those at this time.
I had a question. What about the gravel lot where the old Murph's or the hardware store was? Is that, where they tore the building down there? Is that part of this?
So, yeah, but they should have never gotten a demolition permit for that. Actually, the town should have not given that until plans were approved. That was an illegal or unauthorized distribution of that
So,
demolition permit. So, the town has, for whatever reason over the years, allowed this business and this business to kind of do whatever it wants, and now we sit here with this issue in front of us. So I wasn't here for any of that. I don't know why they were. From my point of view, we've put a business in East Irondequoit right now, Blue Palm, through weeks and months of public hearings, this and that, and all for simply wanting 30 more seats. Yet this project is been free to do whatever the heck they want. So it's kind of embarrassing to try to hold one business accountable for going through the proper process while another business doesn't. And over the last 6 months, Peter, our department has put in extremely amount of work to say, hey, listen, this is the town's fault. The town should have never allowed these certain things to happen, so we will take those responsibility. You need to take responsibility for these items. A very fair and expedited process that no other business in this town would ever be afforded. And we're basically told to eat it. And, since then have been publicly attacked by Mr. Nolan on Facebook. So he's unwilling to have a conversation, but very willing to go out there and just put outright lies onto Facebook. So why this project ever got to the point where it is, while receiving over $3 million of taxpayer money, is something that I can't explain. I wasn't here. So
one of the things I've heard from constituents is that, why is Irondequoit singling out a business, a highly successful business, and not allowing them to do, what they see fit in order to make their business successful. And, I think that the town has been highly supportive, including, coming to bat to get all those grants for, a lot of the building and construction there, as well as, like you were saying, being very amenable to, making the processes more streamlined and things. But nonetheless, the opinion has kind of been that we are singling them out. But in the same token, like you say, we've had before us a Blue Palm, which wants, something relatively minor compared to what the level and extent of what I see here before us, is.
As a former business owner here in Irondequoit, the only way that I-Square has been singled out is by getting grants, by getting special privileges that other businesses don't have, by giving special rights, the ability to do. We have a lot of successful businesses. We have a lot of successful developments here in town that would, quite frankly, be shut down if they had these violations. So I think it's the complete opposite. Having been a business owner in here, if I would have put a table outside, I can guarantee you I would have had a code enforcement at my door the next day violating my business. So to have 100 seats outside when you're supposed to only have 30, it's the complete opposite of what's being presented out there. Also, receiving $3 million plus in taxpayer-funded money, I can guarantee that there's not many businesses here in town that have received that benefit.
And I think I agree with you 100% that, the town probably has been more than supportive to this business and this entity and this development than probably anything in the history of the town.
Well, Pete, you looked at the comment you made about why we singling out. I mean, you look at the site plan that was approved, right, and you look over there, what's there now, it's like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Revisions, you have to come back for revisions off your site plan, that's what you have to do. And I know the refusal coming to the planning board for revisions is not the answer we want to hear. You're not, it's not. You have to come like everybody else. And I can't believe, I could see that there's been a lot of work done to this point, and I'm certainly sure everything in here's right up to today, and everything's, how he got, I don't know. And, I'm going to make my own comment. When I was acting supervisor, I mean, I've been through this too. That parking lot was going. I knew there was supposed to be a building there. The planning board finally called me and said, it's not supposed to be there. We put a stop work order on it because the building's not supposed. I think that was the first time there was any kind of enforcement on what he was doing over there. I took abuse over that, believe me, but it was I still do, it was the right thing to do at the time. We had Mr. Nolan in here, and the two people that were with me are not here no longer, and he just flat out refused to come to the planning board. And revision, we had it set up. I think Rory's and Megan were saying we found an avenue that possibly he can come and figure this out and get it done right. Refused to come to the planning board and do any kind of revision. So here we are today. Start doing site violations, we're gonna have to decide what we're gonna do. We can't continue like this. That's my opinion. It can't go on. There's a lot here. There's not a couple of things here. There's a lot here. There is a lot here.
I don't think I've ever heard of a business owner or developer absolutely refuse to come before the boards that are necessary for their approvals for their development.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at the reaction that the Blue Palm people did. They seem to react very quickly and have the adequate information, including getting a lot of things that were necessary to get that
right. And they understand what needs to be done.
That's only a little 60-person restaurant, a smaller entity, by pretty significant than what the brew company is and the I-Square development is.
So, Mr. Supervisor and Megan, is there an opportunity to at least try one more time to have a reasonable conversation with the business owner before we take punitive action? Can we, and I'm feeling and hearing everybody's frustration, and I get it, but can we try one more time to see if we can move forward and have a conversation and have some kind of a meeting of the minds?
Yeah, and I think that's in his corner. I mean, nobody's ever said, Mike, don't come in here. I've met Mike one or two times. I don't know Mike Nolan. I don't have any vendetta against Mike Nolan. I had a conversation with him. He asked me to legally give him a permit to pave a thing. I checked with several different lawyers, several different people. I went back and looked at the records, and it's illegal for me to do that. I don't have that administrative power. I let him know that, and that I would love to see him come back. And from there, he told me, his job was to make my life miserable. So, and he's doing a great job at it. And, but yeah, doors always open. And, we don't stand in the way of businesses. And, I have a roundtable with 50 to 60 businesses in this town, and very supportive of all businesses in this town. The door's open, and, we thought we had that through a representation of his. We worked very diligently for 6 months to create an easy path for this that no other business would be afforded, and he hasn't taken us up on that opportunity. So yeah, the opportunity's there. It always is there. We don't want to be harassing businesses for violations. We don't want to be making life difficult just to make it difficult. But unfortunately, like I said, we have a lot of businesses here. We have a lot of property owners, and they have to follow the rules. I think we're in a dangerous thing, Peter, when you mention that. We have residents that pay $40,000 a year in taxes, right? They have beautiful houses on the lake. So are they exempt from permits? Are they exempt from rules because they have money? I mean, there has to be a line, right? And we're holding other developers responsible, we're holding other businesses responsible, and there's one business that's not being held responsible. So the door's open for a conversation. Facebook and that path is hurts that, and especially when it's complete and utter lies, when there's not even an ounce of truth to that, it makes it more difficult. But there's been nobody here in town that says Mike Nolan's not allowed to come in here and talk. So
Can we maybe, Mr. Supervisor, create a specific invitation that within a specific time frame, we need him to respond? And if that doesn't happen, then maybe Megan can express in there, our only other alternatives will be X, Y, and Z. We'd like to have the conversation first, but we now have a condensed time frame in which you have to respond.
Haven't we already had the conversation, and then I guess I'm not in disagreement with having the conversation again, but I feel like we've already had the conversation.
Well, there's notes up there where Carrie Ivers and I don't know if it was Dave Seeley or John went and met with him and discussed all this, explained, why certain things could be done and why certain weren't. And, I think his goal is to then have turnover at the town board or the supervisor position, and then come in and hopefully, have an in there that where you go back to just do whatever you want. So, I think that's been his approach. I would love for him to come in and talk again. I'll give him another opportunity. Peter, I know you said he's gotten an opportunity, but there's still opportunity to do that. And if it's, if that's what we have to do, then, I believe we give him another opportunity and give him a chance, and then,
Well, and the issue is
follow the
too,
rules.
I'm all for that, but if you want to give him another opportunity, but then what do we do for him to fix some of this stuff, okay? What are we going to do? You got a stone wall there. You got a parking lot that's not supposed to be there. You got a lot of things there that, need to be addressed. So,
And in our 6-month, work with
Yeah.
a rep from his, from over there,
Right.
we've come up with those solutions.
Okay.
And again, I think, those, we can reoffer him those solutions, which, he has told us to
yeah, I know.
stick it.
He told me
So,
that, too.
I'll give him one more opportunity to say stick it, and then it's time to, do what the town should be doing, that it's failed,
I mean,
Well,
I'm glad to have
doing
him.
for
all
years.
the hard work.
I'm glad to have him come in and talk about all this stuff, but to talk about it is to implement action. Action is absolutely necessary.
Right. You have
We
to,
can't-
like ASAP, I believe, right? It's been there, especially with
Maybe Megan has a timeline she can throw on the table for us.
Well, timeline, sure. I mean, I think probably as soon as possible is a good idea. My one recommendation to the board would be to loop in the planning board in this. I think that from a legal perspective, it would be really good to have an actual review process and then close monitoring of how, anything that's going to be built or changed, close monitoring of how that occurs so that it's faithful to what the planning board approves. And in that way, we're sure that, this property, like every other in the town, complies with the town code.
These are not actions before our board, they're actions before the planning board or maybe the zoning board, unless there's something like for the restaurant seating permit where it needs to come before us, but still the precursor for that is planning board. So what we're asking is for him to
There
vote.
are things here, and Pete, as well as I know, there are things here we can have him remove. Theoretically, right?
So maybe
Okay.
that's part of the
know.
conversation, and maybe you already had this conversation with the owner, but maybe there needs to be a really express conversation that says, we really only have two choices now, and it's A or B, and we don't really want to have to go down the road of B, but we need your partnership to make A work.
Well, I just commend everybody that worked on this. It's getting out there now. It's not,
Yeah, it's a very good report.
It's a good
summation,
report.
and I-
People out there should know exactly this is really enlightening people to know what's going on over there.
I also
You know
think
what
it's very honorable that the town took ownership of
On some things,
its
yeah.
errors and mistakes, and we're not going back on things that we might have gone procedurally down an incorrect path and making those things brought back on, course, because we have ownership, and I think that that's very honorable, on the town's behalf. And
So Megan, how long do we have to get some kind of response from the owner before we really need to go down the path of B?
So at this point, it's really up to you guys. There's no framework that we're working in. We're kind of finding
need
our
some.
way
Yep.
here. To the extent that, and maybe John and Pete would know if additional construction needs to be done. Is there like a weather consideration in the timing?
It depends on what additional construction we're talking about, but
that's
I think we get something out there ASAP because this has to be addressed. I don't want this go on any longer than it has to.
I mean, there's codes, rules, regulations, and planning boards, and that's not at the purview of the town board to how to the path forward on this. And
I'll address the for sale sign. Currently, the property is unsellable. There is too many violations and too many site plan different. There is not a developer or a real estate person in this country that will buy that property as is right now. So that's coming from professionals that have told me. The property is unsellable. So the for sale sign is just a political stunt. And, ultimately, by him correcting all this, will add value to his property and make it a sellable asset. Right now, it's not sellable. There is no chance that anybody is going to buy it knowing that it's in violation and it's so different from its site plan that, we
They
could
wouldn't
be
get
tearing down buildings at this point, so.
They wouldn't get
Which
clean
we
title
won't.
without resolving
Correct.
things to the satisfaction of the town at that point.
Correct.
So,
Okay. All right, so we have bond.
So-
All right, Peter, go ahead.
what did we agree that we're formulating a letter saying he needs to do what or what?
So I think we've given him a plan to a path forward that is not, will not cost him, thousands of dollars. It's very inexpensive. We've created that plan, so I think at this point, we offer, to come in and discuss that plan, and, he takes that plan and moves forward and goes in front of the planning board to get these corrected.
How do we enforce that or make that enforceable or
I think
actionable,
there just
if you
has
will?
to be a timeline, right? There has to be a deadline on making commitment.
otherwise,
We start doing
So
site
we're saying
violations.
make an application for the planning board before X date or something happens, a violation occurs. Is that what we're saying, or
Well,
citation? I mean, what are we
something
saying?
along those lines, absolutely. Is it, you want him to come in for a meeting before X date with a site plan application or I'm sorry, with a planning board application by a certain date, we can do both, or this will happen, or is it just come in and meet with us, or we'll
I
start?
mean, what I heard from Rory was that this plan has already been put forth.
It has.
This plan's already been, so he's got a couple of weeks to decide if he wants to take the town up on their very generous offer, or if he wants to continue to be in violation, and whatever the town code says is violation is his violation. I think that process starts tomorrow, and he's got time to get on the September planning board. When's the date by that? So he's got to be on the planning board. Michelle's not here and Mary's not here, so we'll get that date, and should be on the planning board agenda. If not, then the town has to take the same action it would take against a business or a resident that's in violation of their property.
And, this again seems to me like the town is being very generous.
It's beyond generous, beyond. I mean, that's not even
It should
that's
have
not
never
even a
got to
question.
this, it should have never got to this point,
Yeah.
but it is now, so.
It's another
here and that-
another inherited problem that I'll deal with, but it's got to be dealt with. So
For me, it's not the town persecuting or I-square. It's actually embracing it and creating a better situation from it.
it should never be where it's at today. We have failed the town for the last 8 years of allowing certain things to go on. We've failed businesses where you can't say you're business friendly by letting one business do whatever they want and then attacking all the other businesses. I mean, that's just not how it works. You can't tell Blue Palm and you need to go through this whole process, but they don't. So it's a terrible look for the town, and it's time to correct it after 8 to 10 years of this. So I'll form a thing tomorrow and get it approved by you guys and send off to Mr. Nolan and his representatives.
Again, I think great work, Rory and
It has
staff.
been, this has been very informative. I think the community should take a look at this too and just see what's there, understand our point of view of this.
Is this available, Megan, on the website or somewhere that residents who are feeling frustrated and don't have all the information can seek it out?
We can absolutely post it on the website, and I have given the town clerk a copy of all the documents that you received so they can be included in the minutes of this
Okay.
discussion.
Okay.
Very good, thank you.
All right, we have Bonadio to present the audit, so I'm sure you've enjoyed listening to this for the last hour while we make you wait.
My part's going to be easy compared to the last 20 minutes, so this is great. Thanks for having me in. We reviewed this in detail with the audit committee last week, and so we're reviewing it with you here. And then next week, we'll go through a much higher level presentation at the full board level. So you do have a lot of documents in front of you. They are still all in draft form, which is historically how we do this. The plan would be later this week to get this finalized to be in final form for next week, which we're in good shape with. So just to kind of summarize all the things that we do, we've got the town's financial statement audit. We do a single audit and a DOT audit, which is contained within the documents you have. We have a court procedures that we do, which has already been issued and finalized. We have an asset forfeiture process that we do, which is in draft form right now. Diana has seen a draft of that. And then we have a deferred compensation audit, which will be done. So everything should be done and issued and finalized by the end of August. So we're in good shape with that stuff. So I'm actually not going to go through the highlight package because that's what we'll focus on next week. So this will go in a little more detail on the other packets in case you folks have some questions, okay? So I think the next one after the highlight, the top sheet is just a thin little document which is addressed to the town board. It says significant audit matters on that. That document is the recorded communications letter. And you've seen this in the past. So I'll just kind of highlight some of the areas. There's one area to point out under that qualitative aspects is you did implement GASB 87, and that's something we've talked about for the past few years related to leases. I've been warning you it was coming, and this year it came. The impact of that essentially was because your leases are all lessor leases, so you're leasing space, as opposed to most other places actually have leases that they're paying for. So the impact was essentially to book a receivable on your financial statements related to the long-term payments coming in, and then a deferral. And I'll show you that when we get to the financial statements. But this just identifies that it was implemented. The bottom of the page reviews and are the same estimates you've always had. There's 4 estimates in the town's financial statements. And then really the rest of the narrative of this letter is really consistent with the last year. We had no issues in getting the audit done. We did start later this year, really as a result of some issues on our end, resource-wise. Diana was gracious enough to let us push that out a little bit. But, again, I promised her we'd still get it done in time, which we are. But the audit went well. We get the stuff that we need done from Diana and her staff, and everyone we deal with at the town, really, because we do, as I mentioned, with all the different tasks we do, we touch a lot of folks within the office and ask a lot of questions within the town. So we get that done. At the back of this, you'll see an attachment A, and this represents a summary of the adjustments that we booked in connection with the audit, some that we identified and some that Diana and her team identified. There's only a few that are significant or large, one of which is in the general fund, and there was an adjustment we made to reduce the recognized ARPA revenue for 2022. So it really is just a matter of an overestimation during the year of what was being recognized as ARPA. It's not that it won't ever become revenue. It's just for 2022 it hadn't been earned yet, so we moved it back to the balance sheet. So over the course of next year and the year after, as you use those on projects, that's when it'll be recognized as revenue. So that's the biggest impact when you look at the general fund. The other big one, if you look at the last page of this letter, is under the special grant fund. And that relates to the sale of the Pine Grove building. So I know through the minutes there was a lot of discussion about that, and so you know that a lot of those renovations were done with CDBG funding. And because that project was CDBG funded, they require you to use that portion that they determined to be related to program income on future CDBG activities. So until that happens, you can't recognize it as revenue. So we pulled that off the income statement and put that on the books as unearned revenue. So you will recognize it later. And we did confirm with the funder too how they want to treat that, both on here and with your schedule of expenditures of federal awards. Again, wanted to make sure we did it right. So that's what we did there. So again, more a matter of timing than a matter of incorrectness, if you will. Okay? So that's it on the required communications letter. The next document is the actual financial statements. There's a few pages that I'll identify, but if anyone has any questions at any point, please feel free to chime in and ask them for sure. The opinion is on page 1, pages 1 through 3. That's what you hire us to provide, and what the opinion says, and it's in the second paragraph there, is that the statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the town, and that is what's considered an unmodified or clean audit opinion. That's what you're looking to receive, and you have always had that. So that is what funders are looking for. That's what the federal government is looking for. So that's a positive sign there. What follows that on pages 4 through 15 is all the MD&A, the management discussion and analysis. So that's really kind of a layman's summary of what's going on within the statements. So folks can read that without needing to have an accounting degree necessarily, but gives a good idea of what happened year over year. So you can read that at your leisure. If we look at page 16, what this one is, and I apologize for the smallness of the font, and as I get more years on your audit, the more I have to use my reading glasses. But this is the balance sheet statement of net position. So this represents essentially the town's, all their assets, all their liabilities, like you were a for-profit business, a traditional entity. So this is where you see that. Down in that non-current assets section, that first line, you can see the leases receivable, the non-current portion of those leases that are due to you in the future. In total, with the current portion, it's about 1.6, just a little over 1.6 million. And then I'm going to actually have you jump down a little bit, down under deferred inflows of resources at the bottom. You'll see there's a item for $1.6 million related to that. Because the period of time hasn't transpired yet when those leases are eligible for you, they're not revenue. So over time, you'll relieve this as revenue and also collect the cash related to that receivable. So not a real big income effect this year of implementing the standard, but it gives you an understanding, and I'll show you in the footnotes, of what do we have coming in long-term on these lease payments? So that's really the main benefit of that standard. I'm trying to think otherwise, overall net position at the bottom is a negative, primarily because of your OPEB obligations, in terms of where those stand, as well as pension and some of the debt. So not a bad situation. It doesn't mean that you're insolvent. It's just the way the math works from that perspective. And then looking at page 18 is the actual balance sheet for the town on a fund level, and this is what you're most used to seeing on a month-to-month basis with the information from Diana. So you can see it, by the various major funds. A couple items to point out under liabilities and deferred inflows. The unearned revenues of 17 million, most of that is your ARPA funds that are unspent at this point in time. And then when you go over on that line, you see under the non-major funds, that's the 915,000 related to the Pine Grove facility. And so, but otherwise, you've got, quite a bit of funds in cash, which, as you said, with the ARPA money not spent yet, that's where that is. You're doing your best to maximize the earnings that you can on that, within the limitations that you have. But otherwise, your balance sheet is pretty consistent with year over year. So if we jump ahead, I'll point out the lease footnote, which is on page 38. So when you get to that, you can see all of your leases are related to building-related items. You're leasing, whether it's, tower space, et cetera. And you can see the future minimum lease payments due to the town over the period of time, all the way through 2047 is where that comes in. So you're collecting about 100,000 or so in cash. And part of that goes to the reduction of that receivable. That's the principal portion. And then a portion is considered interest. It's like imputed in terms of where that, what that is. That's what we had to do with that standard. And then the other page to look at, unless there's no other questions there, is 58, which is your budget to actual schedule for the general fund, actually. And when you look at that, your original budget way back, a year ago plus, you budgeted about $842,000 use of fund balance. You made some adjustments through your budgetary amendments and anticipate maybe a use of $2 million of fund balance. But at the end of the day, you almost were essentially break even in terms of your operations, about 143,000 positive, in terms of the actual. And then when you take a look at other changes, it's, and that should be, I got to look at the math on this sheet actually. But yeah, overall, your actual was basically break even from that perspective. All right, and then I think the other thing to point out, we'll look at your federal single audit, which is on page 73. Starting on page 73, you'll see where you are from expenditure perspective. You had $6.5 million of expenditures in federal awards. The bulk of that, which was your COVID funding, was $4.8 million, and that's what we tested this year as a major program. So we tested almost 74% of your federal funds. Typically, it's your CDBG program, and so once this funding, cycles away over the next 2 years, we'll be back to testing that. But we had no issues at all with your federal funding, no findings, no material weaknesses. So that's always a plus as well. And then lastly was your DOT. So New York State requires you to do a single audit of their funding, and that schedule's on page 80. Just under $1 million of spending this year related to New York State DOT programs. The biggest one and the one that we tested was the state touring route, which is a relatively new program. That was about $400,000, or about 45%. So again, we looked at that and we had no issues with compliance or with controls associated with that funding. Any questions at all on the financial statements there? Okay. And then the last document is just the management letter, and there's really not a lot here. It's actually a repeat point. It's one item, and it's kind of because of COVID, you're in this situation, right? You ended up having all this extra fund balance. So you created years ago when the standard first required you to create a fund balance policy, or we reported the new fund balance, you created a minimum and a maximum fund balance policy. It's not required to have a maximum amount in there. What you did, I think, with that 20%, the Governmental Finance Officers Association, the national organization, recommends you have about 20% in fund balance to, kind of stave off issues that might be down the road. So I think that's where that number came from. But you're over that number right now, and you have been because of COVID. So the idea is, does it make sense to continue using a maximum number, or do you just say, hey, we're going to maintain a minimum fund balance of this? Or if you're going to have this, you need to make sure you have a plan for how are we going to get that back down into our policy. So the idea is just take a look at that and see what makes sense for you, just a recommendation. So, and that pretty much covers the document. So if you have questions.
Anyone have any questions, comments?
So when we have the 20% maximum, are we entitled, anything above that? What is our responsibility? Is there a responsibility to it? Or,
Well, it's tricky because the only governments that are actually limited in their fund balance are school districts. They're limited to 4%. No other government is technically limited. However, the controller's office will come in and say you have too much, but they won't come in and say what is your right value. Okay. And so it's just a matter of, and what I always tell my clients who happen to be in this situation is, have a plan for what that's going to be used for.
Okay.
Have you identified future capital needs? You have a 5-year capital plan, so that you can say, this is why we have this amount of money. Or relook at what your capital reserves are to say, hey, are they sufficient given what we want to do? So that's really what you want. There's no.
Yeah,
right or
okay,
wrong.
thank you.
And what percentage of that fund balance due to the extraordinary funds, the one-time funds from COVID funding?
Offhand, it's about 16 million is what is in ARPA right now. But I don't know what percentage, I'd have to look at that math.
I think it would be interesting because that's one-time funds, I can understand fund balance as an ongoing basis because that's from ordinary revenue, but when you start to skew it with ARPA or COVID-related funds, which, that's going to make it seem, which we can only expend until the end of
24.
27?
Four. 24.
So that money, if we don't spend it, it's going to go away, and all of a sudden, if we say, for some reason, we want to reduce our fund balance,
Or do we codify having a higher than 20%, which would be the easiest thing to do, and then we're not under the gun about making a quick expense? Or,
well, I do think also we have a capital plan for some of the, ARPA funding,
Yep.
which probably affects that number, but what I don't want to do is just artificially say, it's high.
Right.
Because we have funding that's one-time funding that's good to go away if we don't use it.
so if we take the cap away and we only have a minimum, and that's what we codify, then we're good.
Right.
Yeah.
That might just be the easiest thing to do.
I used to think the number that we kind of shot for was a 15% number, which was kind of like,
Yeah, and that's a reasonable number. It's not inappropriate to say that's where we want to be, but when you got to somehow identify that there could be issues that come up, so, sometimes saying a maximum puts you into trouble, but again, 15 to 20%, I think any government would be happy to have that amount of money. Fund
And,
balance.
hopefully we've reduced some of that risk by spending our ARPA money smartly, right? So hope
Yep.
some of that risk should be down, so.
right.
So maybe
Which
the
is a
town
good thing.
attorney will counsel us on what direction to move.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Okay, we will move on for items for board action at our August, what's next week, 15th meeting. So we'll move on to the financial report. Madam Comptroller?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. The financial results for the town as of July 31st, 2023. The total expenses, actual as well as encumbered, are $24,389,000, or 56.1% of budget, which is slightly below the 58.3% of the year that has elapsed. Breakdown is $20,488,000 for actual expenses and $3,901,000 for encumbrances. Encumbrances are 9% as departments are continuing to commit to services and supplies for the remainder of the year. The general fund expenses are favorable to budget at 55%, or $15,121,000. The split here is actual expenditures, $13,659,000, and encumbered expenses, $1,462,000. Contained within the general fund encumbrances are general town-wide street lighting, attorney fees, EMS contracts, cemetery columbarium construction, and other contracted expenses throughout the town. Jointly, the highway fund's expenses are greater than the percent of the year that has elapsed at 68.5%, or $4,489,000. Actual expenses within the highway funds are 38.6% of budget, or $2,528,000, and encumbrances account for the remaining 29.9%, or $1,961,000. These costs are typically driven by salt, fuel, roadwork and paving services, and materials such as oil and stoning and asphalt, as well as equipment parts. Expenditures in the library fund are 57.3% of budget at $1,601,000. Included in this amount is a bond payment of $483,000 for principal and interest for the consolidated library. Sewer fund expenses of $2,065,000 equate to 47% of budget. Expenses on the stormwater drainage total $392,000, or 41.7% of budget. We are again underscoring that the expenses excluding encumbrances for the town, as well as the three major funds, are less than the percent of the year that has elapsed. 58.3% of the year has elapsed, and the actual expenditure percentages exclusive of encumbrances for the town is 47.1%. The general fund is 49.7%. Sewer fund is 41.9%, and the collective highway funds is at 38.6%. Revenue received in the general fund is $18,556,000, or 70.3% of budget. Real estate taxes of $12,007,000 have been collected. Payments in lieu of taxes are $251,000, or 97.7% of budget. 2 months of sales tax of $1,271,000 have been recorded. Second quarter receipts are anticipated in August. Other sources of revenue are at 59.7% and include $241,000 in safety inspection fees. Other major revenue items are expected later in the year include franchise fees and aid and incentives for municipalities. Regarding the entire town, $31,624,000, or 74.7% of revenue and appropriated fund balance have been received to date. Approximately $18,260,000 is real estate tax. At the end of July, the library has received $2,759,000, or 98.7% of its budgeted revenue. 67.2%, or $4,385,000, has been received in the collective highway funds. Sewer fund has received revenue of $4,245,000, or 97.3% of that fund's budget. Stormwater drainage has recognized $882,000, or 99.4% of budgeted revenue. In addition, American Rescue funds of $22,455,000 have been received. Roughly $7,156,000, or 31.8%, have been expended to date on various projects, including McAvoy turf and other various playground retrofits, columbarium construction, sewer and drainage improvements, and IT projects and equipment. This concludes the financial report for the month of July 2023.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, we'll move on to minutes.
I have a quick question.
Oh,
Mr.
sorry.
Supervisor.
Go right ahead.
Are we going to do any reports from departments today, or are we not?
No. If you do have, I sent all the updates.
Sorry, I didn't.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if you have any questions from those, we can ask it right now if you want to.
I didn't have a chance to look.
Oh,
at
you
it.
didn't look at them? Okay. All right, sorry. Yeah, I sent an email with all the updates, I think, right? Did everybody get it? Okay, all right. But does anybody, I guess I'll go back, does anybody have any questions for specific department heads from those updates?
No.
Okay. All right, minutes?
There's two
Oh,
sets of,
I'm sorry, what?
I'm sorry, if I could, I
Yeah.
I'd like to provide one brief update on
Sure.
the Freeman Second Circuit lawsuit. We do have an argument date before the Second Circuit in New York City, and that's October 5th. So that's the only legal update that I have for you.
Are we allowed to speak at that?
No. Oh, you cannot raise your hand? You cannot speak? Alrighty then.
You can raise your hand, it's just not advised. Yeah.
Not advised.
That's right.
It's been done.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
There's two sets of minutes, July 11th, July 18th,
thank
and
you.
these are updated copies, I guess.
Why, thank you.
Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments on minutes? All right, we will now move on to items for board action. Madam Clerk?
There are going to be two public hearings. One was left open from July on the matter of 4348 Culver Road. And the one for August is the amending of the town code, section 79, relating to certain domestic animals.
Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments about these public hearings? Okay, we'll move down to first item, first resolution.
Under appointments, there are three appointments. The first one is an assessment clerk.
Okay, Jason?
Yeah, thank you. The assessment clerk would be Joan Woodruff. Joan presently does work in the assessor's office as an office clerk 4. She's done a tremendous job in the department, and the assessor has recommended that we have an assessment clerk. So Joan is qualified. She's ranked number 1 on the list, and we would like to appoint her to that permanently.
Okay, Amy, would you like to add anything to that?
I would. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. So Joan has worked here for about 3 years. She came from a completely different industry to come and work here. She is great at providing customer service. She's a great investigator. She's also very eager and has learned all of, the skills that we've asked her to learn, and provides she just does a great job. She's very thorough, attention to detail, and doesn't like to make mistakes, which sometimes I give her a hard time about because we all make mistakes. But I'm really pleased that to have her promoted. So I'm happy for her.
Thank you. And with our new policy, those, any resumes or, in her case, reviews are available in the HR's office for any board member who wishes to review them. So move on to the next one.
The next one is the appointment of a provisional dispatcher.
Okay, Jason?
Yeah, thank you. This one, due to a promotion, we have a vacancy in the Public Works. This is in the blue collar unit. We did post this because it's competitive and there is no civil service list. After conducting interviews, the department would like to recommend Robert Losey to this position. He would be provisional and he would have to take the exam the next time it's around.
Okay, thank you. Tommy, would you like to add anything?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Mr. Losey comes to us with over 20 years' experience in dispatching and office administration. He is also currently a volunteer firefighter with the Rich Culver Fire District, and also a member of the Rich Culver Fire Association, and he is a town resident for a lifetime.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Okay, next item.
This is the appointment of a provisional fire marshal.
Okay, Jason?
Similarly, we have a vacancy in community development, and actually with this one, we did canvass the civil service list. It was not a viable list. The list has been around quite some time. So with no candidates, it's been posted publicly several times over the past several months, and the interview committee would like to recommend William W. Lang Jr. to this position. It would be provisional, and he will need to take the exam. And just before I finish up, I would apologize that I have one more resolution after this.
Okay, Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions or comments? Jason, who was the part of the interview committee?
I know that Mary Werner and former Fire Marshal Greg Merrick were leading that. I don't know if they selected a third to be with them.
Okay. So there's some excitement around this hire. He seems to be well qualified and a much needed addition to that department. Am I right on that?
Absolutely. Greg Merrick spoke very highly of him. We have a good deputy right now, and he's still pretty new on the job, and the new leadership, I think, will help him develop as well.
Perfect, thank you. Anyone else? All right, Jason, do you want to present the next one?
Yes, thank you. This would be for an office clerk 4. This would be a permanent appointment, also in the community development department. We had canvassed the civil service list, and again, the interview committee made a selection of Carol Haney. Carol is reachable on that list, and she came recommended by Mary Werner.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, next item.
From the Comptroller's Office, it's authorizing payment for 2022 playground space fees.
Okay, Diana?
Thank you. So this resolution will authorize the payment to the West Irondequoit School District for the building usage for the 2022 summer playground program. Prior to 2022, these fees were offset by paving work done by Department of Public Works, and it's not ideal to mix the funds between the departments, so in 2022, we decided to segregate them.
Thank you.
This decision was made by an employee, not by the board, so we want to make sure that going forward, this is transparent and our taxpayers can see where the money is flowing in and out of. Am I right on that? Correct? Okay. Anyone have any questions or comments?
No, thank you, Diana.
Thank you.
Okay, next item.
Authorizing the annual audit of the town courts.
Okay, this is an annual resolution to accept the 2022 court audit. The audit was performed by the Bonadeo Group for the 2022 audit year. This resolution is required by the New York State Office of Court Administration.
Okay, any questions or comments? Okay, next item.
From the court, authorizing transfer of funds from one budget under conference and training to the capital expense account.
Okay, Sally?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. So we ran into a little bit of a problem with the countertops that we ordered for our JCAP project. And after going back to the contractors, it was determined that we would have them relaminated or new ones built. I'm not sure which, but the cost to the court is half of the cost. The contractor is also paying half. And so to pay for those items, we are requesting that the town allow us to transfer funds from our conference and training budget line, which we have 2 of our 3 judges, maybe even all 3 of them this year, not going to conference in the fall. And so we have some money there that we can move over into the capital improvement budget line to pay $750 for the counters.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, next item.
Under Human Resources, authorizing the town's bereavement policy for non-represented employees.
Okay, Jason?
Thank you. As I've mentioned in some of my department updates, I have been working on some of the policies, the HR policies at the town, and I will periodically be bringing these before the board for your approval. This first one would be our bereavement policy. It's very outdated, and the revision is intentionally broad to really focus on employee well-being and give the employees the time they need when they lose a loved one.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions or comments?
No, but thank you for taking the time to do this, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next item.
Adopting a leave donation policy.
Okay, Jason?
Thank you. This is actually a new policy. We've had a written agreement and somewhat of an informal practice at the town to allow one employee to donate when another employee is in need of sick leave, long-term sick leave. There are some IRS rules around this, and if it's not a medical emergency, there's a risk that one employee might have to pay taxes on the donation as well as the one receiving it. We thought it would be best to put some parameters around this and implement a formal policy. So the policy before you has the medical emergency exception, and what we would do is create a sick pool. Employees can donate vacation or sick leave to this. It will be converted into a cash value for when another employee or their immediate family member needs that, and they're totally out of their time.
Okay, any questions or comments? So just so everybody understands, this has been done by the town for years with really no consistency or set standards, so this is just setting the standards so that everybody's on the same page and everybody's aware of it.
Correct. We had a written MOA with each union dating back to, I think, 2009, but it was very general and just didn't have a good structure.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Okay, next item.
The next 5 are under police. The first is authorizing attendance to pepperball instructor armorer certification.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir. This was something that I noticed, another shortcoming when I took over. The department didn't have basically a long-range, less than lethal option, kind of like a beanbag gun, something that they could use in a situation where they could quite possibly use less lethal force on somebody that they needed to take custody of. I noticed that they did have some pepper ball launchers, I think about 5 of them, that they were unused or they were uncertified for. So I'd like to get them, the officers, take one of my investigators there to get the training so that he can come back and actually certify the rest of the police officers so we can get these valuable tools out in the cars for the officers.
Okay, any questions or comments? Okay, next item.
Accepting New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services grant for fiscal 2022.
Okay, Chief.
This is a continuation of our Stone Garden grant, something that the department has received probably at least over the last, I say, 8 years. And this is this year's 2022's award, and we're going to accept that for conducting some of our details out there.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, next item.
Next one is accepting a grant for 2 new police bicycles.
Okay, Chief.
Yes, our old police bicycles are well beyond repair. They've been used quite well, and somebody has come forward to give us an anonymous grant that they would like to give us the money to purchase 2 fully outfitted police bicycles so that we can, officers, if they have a chance, they can actually take them out on patrol and take them out in their neighborhoods and actually get a little bit closer to the communities. And it's a little bit way to get your ears to the ground, and it's a nice way to get out and meet people and just instead of driving by in a police vehicle.
Okay, any questions or comments?
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I think this is great. I think it goes right with our teen academy, some of our community outreach stuff we're doing. Our police department has taken wonderful steps forward to creating gaps or lessening gaps in our community. So, and seeing an officer out there in his shorts riding around on a bicycle is fantastic. So they do wear shorts on those, don't they, Chief?
Absolutely.
All right.
You should see my legs.
Perfect. I can't wait. Can't wait. All right, next item.
Declaring surplus items, authorizing the sale of said items, and appropriating funds.
Okay, Chief.
Yes, this is actually for the sale of surplus ammunition to the Camillus Police Department. Back when the Greece Police Department transitioned over to their new weapons, they had huge surplus of 45 ammunition. We were not able to get it because of the global war on terror that was going on. So when Greece transitioned, they had the surplus ammo. We bought it at their cost. And so we have an quite a large amount of ammunition that we probably would never use, and Camillus is continuing to use the 45 ACP ammunition, so we were just willing to kind of give them a bunch of ours, and it's going to be sold at the same cost that we got it, so it's basically a zero-sum game.
Okay, any questions or comments? Okay, next item.
Next item is amending Chapter 93 of the Code of the Town of Irondequoit regarding bow hunt regulations.
Okay, Chief, do you want to?
Yeah, obviously we spoke about this previously. This is going to be changes to the bow hunt program. 3 changes that we have within 30 days of the close of the program each year. IPD, we will make information available on the website about how many deer were called in each program. We collect that data anyways, and this time we'll just make sure that it's all electronically put out there for people to see. I'm trying to think what else here they have. We also are going to have people who participated have always signed a code of conduct, but this time it's going to be electronically filed and signed, and that'll be out on October 1st of every year. So each participant will be required to read and sign, and we will have an electronic copy so that we can keep that in for the required time frame. And also I know we talked about this, erecting of deer stands of any type no earlier than 30 days prior to the start of each season. And then deer stands must be removed no later than 30 days after the close of each season.
So I think, Chief, sorry to interrupt you, I think this is where we want to make a slight change to our updates, if Megan wants to touch on that.
Yeah.
Certainly. So at the public hearing and in the board discussion, there was a focus on the requirement to remove the tree stands and how it could be quite onerous. And in balancing that with the community's concerns, I would suggest a change to that last portion where if there is a complaint that is verified upon investigation, the complaint could be made to the police department. An officer would then investigate it. If it's verified as being unsafe or hazardous in any way, then the tree stand would need to be removed. My understanding is that many of these tree stands you can't even ever see. They're on people's personal real property.
Yep.
So if they're not a problem, they don't need to be moved. But if in fact they are hazardous and there is a complaint about it and it's verified, those could be removed. This is not a material change to what was presented previously, which is why you're not getting a new copy of it now. But if in fact you would like to see that change, I can implement it and circulate it.
So I went out and looked. I could not find any tree stands, and I knew the properties that they were at. So
Did you bring your binoculars?
yeah, I guess maybe I forgot those. But I think it's important that, for the ones that are not interfering or they're not safe to leave alone, but there are obviously residents that have concerns with certain ones around their property, and they should have a right to ask the police to review those, and if there's an issue, then they can come down. Otherwise, forcing every single property to do this would be unnecessary, it seems. So, and we've also made these changes. This program has stayed the same for 5 years. It was a promise to update or look into things every year, and so we've made significant steps to change some things, and we'll continue to do that. But I think we've listened to the concerns of our residents. We've listened to the concerns of the bow hunt program, and I think we've come up with a pretty good first step to adding to this program. So I don't know what anybody else has on that, or
I think that's a good change as it relates to the tree stands. It makes sense.
Okay.
I agree. I think there are folks, and I would have done this back in the day, who use those tree stands to bird watch or to nature watch, and we shouldn't penalize them.
Yep. Okay. All right. So we'll make that change, and that the public hearings are closed for this, so we will vote on this Tuesday. All right, next item.
Under Recreation, authorizing the supervisor to enter into various contracts with vendors for youth, family, adult, group exercise, and senior recreational programming for fall 2023.
Okay, Director of Recreation, Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. This resolution will allow us to enter into contract with various instructors for our fall program cycle at the community center, including mostly group exercise, martial arts, dance programs for seniors, families, and youth.
Okay, any questions or comments? I'll just say kudos to the summer camps that went on. They were full. The kids had plenty of stuff to do. I got to visit a few of the camps, and lots of smiles and great activities going on for them. So great job there, and looking forward to continuing to build our rec department and our community center.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, next item.
Next item is approving the special event license for Rochester Triathlon 2023 New York State Championship. And this is an event that has occurred in town often. The approvals are in. It is going to be held Saturday, August 26th from 4 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Will you be there at 4 a.m., Barb?
Yeah.
You will be? All right.
Well, except I'll be here working.
Working, yeah. All right, any questions or comments? Obviously, this starts at Durand, right? And then
Yeah.
just goes through our,
It goes through, part of it goes through Irondequoit.
okay, perfect. All right, next item.
And the next one is approving the special event license for Point Pleasant Firemen's Association Sportsman's Raffle Number 30. And this is an event that they have held often. It's going to be held on Saturday, September 23rd at the Point Pleasant Firehouse on Ewer Avenue from 5 p.m. onward.
Okay, any questions or comments?
Just a quick question, Mr. Supervisor. What are we raffling? What are they raffling?
Does it list what they're raffling?
Like,
We could,
I'm not
We'll-
really
we'll-
sure.
I know in the past we had received
A list of
They've
items
done
that
them,
they were
they've done
raffling
them
when they
several
had
times in the
raffles.
past.
so we can reach out to them and find out what the raffles are.
Thanks.
And kudos to them. The Pea Pickers finished a couple weeks ago. They finished fourth out of 40 to 50 teams. I think it's their highest finish in that particular tournament down in Long Island. So kudos to them, who are part of Point Pleasant. All right. Do we have any walk-up resolutions left, or that we got them all in? Jason got his in. That was the one. All right. That concludes. We do have one item for board action today. So, Madam Clerk, could you please read that?
Yes. Item number 1, calling for a public hearing authorizing amendment to the Town Code Section 79 regarding certain animals.
Okay, motion to adopt.
Moved?
Can I get a second?
Second.
Second, okay. Is this Chief that's doing this? Who's got this?
I'd be
Oh,
happy
I'm
to
sorry,
address
Megan.
it if-
Sorry, Chief, I
I
saw
don't
the
need to
panic in your
jump in,
face over there.
So previously, there was an amendment to the town code for habitually barking dogs that you considered part of the discussion at the public hearing, and then comments that I actually heard from your animal control officer after the fact prompted some additional changes. So we need to renotice a new public hearing, which will be for next week. So publication of that public hearing can start tomorrow morning if in fact this resolution is approved, and you can still have the public hearing next week. The changes are that it's going to be also reducing the number of days that the animal control officer has to hang on to a dog. And it's just bringing it in line with New York state law on that. There were actually more days of the town code required, and that could be very expensive for people who are retrieving the dogs. So, because there is a per diem charge. In addition, there was a section in the cat section that required the animal control officer to collect and house cats under certain circumstances, and that's just not feasible. It's not something that's been done because of space and the expense associated with it. We're not eliminating the entirety of the cat section because there are vaccination requirements and those sorts of things, but just the town's responsibility to collect and house the cats.
Yeah, and this is just another code update that's continues the process of updating our codes. Our codes are, in a lot of cases, very outdated, very not specific, and need updating. And it's very important that we continue to go down this path of correcting our codes and making them more useful here in town. So,
And I did notice, a good deal of that cat section was taken out, but, recently, in the press, I think it was Gates or Chile, I think it might have Gates, where, a person's house was infested with cats. And in that case, the cats, I think in that case went to Lollipop Farm, but did we take out enough or too much of it that, in the case of, someone that was a hoarder that kept too many cats and, caused a significant nuisance to the neighborhood, is there enough teeth in there that we have some way of enforcing that or doing something in that regard?
I think it becomes a county issue, right, with the health department at that point?
Certainly, I believe that the county health department should become involved at that point, but there are, if there's damage or unsanitary conditions, those parts remained in the code. It's just, so people used to be able to just call the animal control officer and say, pick up a cat. It's a feral cat that's living in my garage, or on my street, and that's not going to be an option anymore.
Does that answer your
Just as
question?
long as there's enough code enforcement in there, that type of scenario. And I'm anecdotally, I can probably think of a few of those cases where hoarders or people that keep multiple cats, hundreds of cats in the case of Gates, and it was really difficult for the neighbors to get some enforcement in that matter, and it significantly affected their quality of life. And I just want us to gut our code that we don't have any way of enforcing things again, and maybe somebody could just,
So this has been approved by the animal control officer. I don't know if Chief has any additional thoughts?
Yeah, so the part that we're really modifying is, what really stems from it is the call for stray cats. A lot of people will call to sit there and say there's feral cats that are living behind my shed. And quite frankly, across the board, across New York State, most animal control shelters do not deal with feral cats anymore, other than what happens is a feral cat colony becomes very territorial, and they won't allow any new cats to come in their colony, and that colony actually eventually just dies off. But the problem is when people do-gooders who like cats go out there and they feed the cats, and they put up fake structures for them and everything, what happens is we just do not have the resources, and most animal control entities do not have the resources to be able to gather up 10 to 15 feral cats that are out in the wild. When you're talking about, especially inside a house where you have a hoarder, that's a whole different situation. That is definitely a health situation that the Department of Health would go in, and we, the actual Monroe County animal control officers would be able to sit there and make entry into a house to be able to get in there to rectify that situation. How that happened out in Gates, I have no idea, but it's definitely a situation where we would easily be able to get inside that house and actually figure out, obviously, unsanitary conditions. And at that point, we would bring in other resources to be able to rectify that situation.
Okay, anyone else? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Okay, Okay, this resolution has been adopted. This now concludes our workshop meeting of August 8th, 2023. Our next meeting is a regular town board meeting on Tuesday, the 15th at 7 PM here in the Broderick Room. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Moved?
Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. This meeting has been adjourned.